What is going on, everyone? Welcome back into Road Graders. It's your guy, Cole Jackson, and today I am joined by a very special guest, friend of the program, fellow boy who eats lunch. It's Jake Luke. Jake, how's it going, my guy?
It's good. I actually got a workout in. I ate some lunch. You know, the thing about road graders, Cole, is that they grade the road.
They great. You know what's funny? So I was trying to not Google, sorry. I was trying to search on YouTube for my channel, and all I typed in was Road Graders, and there wasn't even 3 pages in, not even a mention of my channel. It's just videos of road work. My fellow road graders and the work that they do.
You got to get some SEO optimization going on there.
Seriously, and powerful machines. So you really have to type in Cole Jackson, or else it ain't coming up. But today we are going to be talking about all things Steelers Ravens. Interesting question that I saw. Friend of the program, friend of both of our programs, Bobby Trossett put out there. I thought we could start there.
Bronco Ball.
I think this is a great question. It's something I haven't really thought much about, but has the Steelers-Ravens rivalry lost its luster? What are your kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it has, certainly. I mean, you think back to 2008 to 2012, I kind of see that, and maybe to an extent a little bit before that as the glory years, because I was actually doing a little research for a project that I might still do. I didn't have enough time to get it out this time, kind of going back through all of it. And it really, I think, starts in kind of the 2001 playoffs.
Right.
Because in the 90s, the Steelers, I think, won the majority of those matchups. The Ravens finally beat them in Three River Stadium in 1999. Then the Ravens win a Super Bowl. And all of a sudden, it takes on a way different tenor than it was when it was the Browns and the Steelers, which, Ozzie Newsome and Art Modell, they kind of took the rivalry with them to an effect. So, yeah, I mean, the Ravens won a championship. They legitimize themselves in the eyes of the world. That kind of makes them one of the big players in the AFC Central there at the time. And then, they win that championship. They play in the playoffs. The Steelers kind of waxed them in the 2001 playoffs, actually. And then the AFC North gets formed maybe a year or two later. That's when all these characters get, really introduced. James Harrison, Hines Ward, Terrell Suggs, Bart Scott, 2005. And then you had all those holdovers from the 90s still. And that's when it really jacked up. And, yeah, I think the peak of it certainly was all the way then up through 2012, I think. But, yeah, since then, it's taken on a different shine. And I just think that with the way that like players are just all about their brands now, and football is just kind of this like whitewashed capitalistic type enterprise that the NFL is, at least. It just makes it hard for real authentic rivalries to hold true. But I've always compared this one to like an old soccer rivalry, like just like soccer teams. You know how some of them go back 150 years, and like some of these kids grow up, they don't even know why they hate the team across town, but they do. That's kind of where this is for me right now, at least.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, the way I put it is playing each other in the playoffs is what kind of keeps, like, a couple of years ago, we had something legitimately going with the Titans and their fans, and that was kind of a reincarnated rivalry from Eddie George versus Ray Lewis. And we play them in 2019. We obviously get severely disappointed. That's huge bragging rights for them. Then we come in and stomp on their logo in 2020. Like it got pretty intense. But even now, it's faded, right? Like I don't even think anything of the Titans anymore. We play them in 2 weeks or something, and I mean, I'm sure during game week, like every week, it's like, yeah, screw the Titans. But
the thing about growing up here is everyone has that one kid in their friend group that was like, oh, I'm just going to be a Steelers fan for no reason. It's just because they won the Super Bowl in 05, or maybe they were around for 08, and they're like, oh, I'm going to jump on the Steelers bandwagon. Like we all knew those kids. I'm actually related to one of them who's since then switched over to the Ravens, funny enough. So, yeah. It's just that kind of jacks it up a little bit more. I think geographically there's maybe a little bit more going on than people realize. I know it's like 6 hours away, but, it's still relatively close for NFL teams at least.
Yeah, no, that's true. And, yeah, obviously I'm Canadian, and up here there's no NFL team to grow up with, so you get the hodgepodge mosaic of – you get a lot of Patriots fans, but the Steelers just being a popular franchise of – a lot of people's parents. My dad was actually a Steelers fan. So like a lot of rough and tumble Eastern Ontario guys are Steelers fans because of the Iron Curtain and all that good stuff in the 70s, 80s, whatever it was. Anyway, let's get into the game itself. So start on the offensive side of the ball. what do you think of Lamar Jackson last week? Like, I think that's kind of where everyone's focus is going to be every week. And I think, obviously the quarterback's most important position, but it takes on a new meaning when you're paying your quarterback. It raises that expectation. So through 4 weeks, kind of where are you at with Lamar and what are you seeing?
Yeah, no, it's I think the main word that I've kind of been hitting on is just patience and like calm and just all the adjectives that really make me feel like he's matured a little bit as a player. There have been times I think in the past where he's had really big games, but maybe it felt a little panicky. I think of that Chiefs game where he kind of went Super Saiyan mode, but he opened that game up by throwing a couple picks, and then it was very feast or famine, firing the ball downfield. It's the jump pass to Hollywood Brown. Like, we haven't had that end of the spectrum, but we also haven't had the other end of the spectrum where he's losing it a little bit. His footwork is getting sloppy. He's dropping his eyes. He's doing the weird arm angles. We haven't seen much of that. It just feels like there's a plan with Monken. They go out there and they try to execute it to the best of their ability. I think they stuck with their plan a little bit too long against Indy, and that got them in trouble. But it just seems like they know that they're a little handcuffed injury-wise right now, and they need him to be the guy that's like, all right, we need someone to look to right now in all this chaos. And I think to his credit, he's saying like, yeah, I'm the guy, look at me, and I'm going to settle down, and I'm just going to throw to the sticks, and I'm going to run when I need to, and we're going to execute these design quarterback runs effectively. We're all going to be in our sectors. We're going to be where we need to be. And it's just been very effective. Nothing super impressive outside of a couple throws here and there that are really nice, but it's just, it's very impressive so far, and in kind of an understated way, which I think is a nice change of pace.
Yeah, I kind of like the way you put it, because things have seemed a little bit more simple with Lamar, whereas it wasn't always that way. And that's not a critique or a bad thing. It's more just, I think he's really matured in how he's approached the quarterback aspect of things, where especially last week where his coverage was breaking, or his pass protection was breaking down quicker than you'd like to see. And yet he was hanging in there really tough. And, a couple of times where he scrambled to create space, but then reset and threw, like the dime he threw to Zay Flowers. I feel like last year, the year before, maybe that turns into a quarterback scramble, but he stayed a lot more patient and really trusts the backside of his blocking. And I mean, the big thing with Lamar has been, the offensive line needs to do their thing. And I think obviously we were dealing with a half a game of 2 backup tackles, which is always going to be tough. McCary was kind of outmatched early in that game against Myles Garrett, which is to be expected. I mean, he went just only so much you can do against a beast like that. And to be quite frank, they weren't really helping McCary, which was surprising. Like, it wasn't constant 6-man protections, constant. So one thing I've noticed with Monken, he's big on keeping the running back in, but not so much keeping in tight ends outside of Ricard. And Ricard's only played about 4 or 5 pass protection snaps per game. So that's obviously huge. But what I really like to see, and someone just made the comment, you're absolutely right, Lamar does absolutely make things easier for your offensive line. And I find that he's taken that next step where, he'll scramble, create space in the pocket, and then deliver the pass rather than have to scramble and go for a run. And that's what I think is making a huge difference this year. And I find that the offensive line's taking some good steps to, and I don't know, we can't hear what's going on, but I'm assuming there's better communication when he's moving in the pocket, and they're kind of doing a better job of walling off to create space for him and create kind of that backside blocking. So I think that's been really good to see. Sounds like we're going to get Ronnie Stanley back on the offensive line. I personally think we're going to see Patrick McCary at right tackle. I'm not sure Morgan Moses is going to get to the point where he's able to practice. How do you kind of see that working?
Yeah, I guess you probably just go with McCary, right? I mean, it doesn't feel like Falele. It feels like they like him at left tackle, funny enough. And obviously, he's been a little bit disappointing there. So I don't know if I love the idea, especially in a mobile offense where you're running to the strong side a lot with a guy who's maybe got some cinder blocks, situations going on down there with the feet. So yeah, I'd maybe just go with McCary. I like the mobility. I like the intelligence and the ability to come up and step up in a pinch, which he's done at pretty much just about every position at this point. So I think I would go with him. We'll see what happens with Moses's health. I think a report just came out from our guy Jeff that said he's not practicing. I think I just saw. Neither is Stanley, but it sounds like it's a vet day. So yeah, we'll see what happens.
If Stanley doesn't go this week, there's something going on. Like
Jeff said in the past he's taken Fridays as a vet day. what did he say? Okay, yeah, 4 Ravens not practicing: Otis Ronnie Stanley and Morgan Moses, Odafe Owe, and Daryl Worley. So those are your 4 not practicing right now. Stanley, potential vet day. He is couching it as.
Okay. Yeah, and so I think the big difference from what I've heard at practice is last week, even when Ronnie was a participant, he didn't practice in 11s, and this week he did. So that's where I got the confidence that Stanley's going to be playing. Morgan Moses yesterday, even though he was limited, there's degrees of limited, right? And so I think he was limited in the sense that he barely did anything, but he did technically practice. So that's why I put the tweet out this morning that McCary would probably be the right tackle. And in 11s yesterday at practice, McCary was the right tackle. So I don't think the reporters are allowed to share that information, or else they get a visit from Ravens PR, which is what you never want. But they can't get to me in Canada, so it is what it is.
I wouldn't, try Chad Steele like
that. I don't welcome him into the country. So I think that's what we're going to see on the offensive line. Obviously, Linderbaum inside was Zeitler, who had a much improved day. Another group I wanted to talk about with you a little bit is the running back group, because, I feel like 2 weeks ago and even before last week, we were talking a little bit about who are some trade guys we could go after in the running back room. And then, I thought Melvin Gordon's played pretty good. Gus had a little bit more shake to him, a little bit more explosiveness. Justice Hill's been a little jitterbug. How do you feel about the running back position? Do you see that was that just last week? Or do you still see possibly an addition there?
Yeah, I probably could see an addition happen. I don't know. We'll see what happens as far as trade targets and how they shake out. But Gordon was good. I issued a mea culpa on him because I expected it to be kind of a disaster, and I expected him to have fumbling issues, which seems like everyone else on this team is having fumbling issues. And in the limited action that he's seen thus far, he hasn't. So credit to him. I don't know if I'd expect that magic dust to kind of last forever. I expect him to maybe run into some more issues at running back, even outside of just him, whether it's health-wise or something else. And Justice Hill doesn't look all the way explosive. Like we saw him try to turn that play upfield, stumbled a little bit. Maybe you probably lose 5 to 10 additional yards on that play because of it. And then Gus, I don't know if he's ever going to be prime Gus again with all the injuries that he's, gone through and the degeneration of that knee. So I don't know. It's something that I would be monitoring. I probably would prefer to use premium capital on other positions, maybe a corner and edge. But if you can get a throwaway type deal that like the Rams got for Akers, that Minnesota, I don't think they sent anything too rich. So if you can find a guy like that, I'm good with it.
Yeah, I tend to agree, especially with I put it out there this week, and I kind of stand by it. If they're going to add anywhere, it would be at the edge position for me. I think they've been doing a really good job with the Moneyball approach there. They're paying a $3.8 million cap hit to Kyle Van Noy and Jadeveon Clowney this year, and they got 10 pressures out of the 2 of them last year. That's the value in that is absurd. So I'm assuming they're going to be continuing to do that, but I think that's the one position where you add a Danielle Hunter and, they could really kind of get things going. If they add a corner, I'm never going to be against it. But I've been just more impressed, I think, with the guys that are filling in there. I thought Stevens has played well. Darby was really solid. They suddenly were deep at outside cornerback, which is something I don't think anyone was expecting, which is such a classic Ravens thing to happen. And now you kind of have the opportunity to match play, and maybe you do move Marlon into the slot on certain looks and certain formations that the offense throws your way. You're not forced to keep him outside, and that also helps Kyle Hamilton and the creative things that Mike McDonald's done with Hamilton and Queen and Roquan. That expands a little bit when Marlon Humphrey comes back, now that you have that depth at outside corner, which is good. So I kind of agree on the running back room. In the wide receiver room, it sounds like we're getting Rashad Bateman back. I'm trying to find Jeff's tweet. Did he practice again today? I know it just came out.
Yeah, it looks like he did. He was not listed on the 4 who didn't. So
okay, so no reason he shouldn't be playing this week. OBJ was weird. I have my little conspiracy theory that he could have played last week, but they decided to keep him out. He was limited yesterday. We'll see with OBJ. I'd like to get him back, but getting Rashad Bateman back is pretty big. Bateman, Zay Flowers, Nelson Aguilar is kind of your 3, pushes Duvernay back to the bench. I think that's a good spot to be in with the wide receiver room. And this Steelers defense is not classic Steelers defense. It's their 4th worst against the run, and I think it was 6th worst against the pass. So it's a bit Swiss cheese back there. And so I think that's a spot. The strength is their edge group. It's Alex Highsmith and it's TJ Watt. That Watt guy. So that's the strength.
Yeah, Highsmith listed as questionable too.
Yeah, we'll get into this in a little bit later, but Steelers O-line's pretty banged up right now too, and they struggled mightily against the Houston Texans last week. So, but I think that one of the guys that flashed on me when I was going through the Steelers film was Keanu Benton. He was talked a lot about with Ravens fans looking at the interior pass rush need. Kid out of Wisconsin in his rookie year, he's really coming along. Larry Ogunjobi's having a little bit of a career revitalization year. So that D-line's the strength. And so what I'd really like to see, and the key to the game for me, is a lot of the things that they did last week against the Browns, counters. I think that worked really well, running counters at Myles Garrett. The Houston Texans actually completely limited TJ Watt. He only had 3 pressures last week. What they did is they just sent a lot of pullers at him, play action pulls with kind of a guard coming out to kick out Watt and run a double team. They ran at him quite a bit, and that's not to say TJ Watt's a bad run defender. It's just sucking him up into the action, forcing him to read things, and then using play action off of that can kind of limit his explosiveness upfield. So if Patrick McCarry's going to be there, McCarry's actually had decent success at right tackle against TJ Watt. He played both games at right tackle in 2021. Across those 2 games, he only allowed 3 pressures. So, it's TJ Watt. He can have, a game-breaking moment at any point, but I think McCarry's actually had some success against him, which is good to see. So, what are you kind of expecting from the offense in this one? You think it's going to be pass heavy, run heavy? How would you kind of approach this one?
Yeah, I would probably say try and go for some of the deep shots early, particularly with Flowers. I mean, this cornerback not super impressive to me when you talk about it being headlined by Patrick Peterson and our guy Derek last night on our podcast, which you can listen to out today, made the point that their like strategy with corners the past couple of years has been to like go and get these like 77, 78 overall type guys, to play Madden. It kind of feels like that, and it feels like Zay Flowers can, certainly take advantage. And I think whether you hit on them or not, actually having wide receivers and like having threats in this offense and showing that you're not afraid to use them is going to open things up in the run game. And I'd like to do that early to set a tone so you can clear some running lanes for an Edwards and for some of these guys who could maybe use the help. Like we said, it's not the most impressive running back group you've ever seen to that point. So I'd probably try to throw a few a little bit early, get them on their toes a little bit, and like actually having wide receivers and maybe using the pass or the threat of the pass to set up the run is the approach that I would take. And then you kind of grind them out late and hope you can get out of there with a close win.
Yeah, Patrick Peterson, I just pulled up his PFF coverage numbers. So he's allowed 216 yards in 4 games, 4 touchdowns, and 14 catches. Weird thing is he's allowed 94 yak with 4 missed tackles in there. So I think that could be a really interesting matchup with Zay Flowers and what he can do in space. That would be kind of, the best area to go. They have another corner. I'm trying to remember who it was. I was looking at the PFF numbers, but they had 2 guys in the top 10 in yards allowed amongst corners. So they have a couple guys that are just kind of getting cooked out there. So
Levi Wallace.
Levi Wallace, former Buffalo Bill. That's right. And he's actually 5th in the league in yards allowed with 260. He's also allowed 57 yak. So, and they have pretty high ADOTs in coverage. So again, they're getting beat deep. That's something that I think Monken's been missing a little bit in this offense. There's a couple plays last week where they didn't really have a deep route in the concept that was called, and it was getting a little frustrating just because, Lamar's been actually pushing the ball downfield pretty well. He had a couple misses in that week 1 matchup, but I think he's really settled in so that when they're there, he's willing to take them and get the ball out. Obviously, the pass protection plays into this. They've played a couple good D lines, and they're getting another one this week. But the way that those deep shots can kind of open things, I think it's been a huge missed opportunity. So hopefully we see a little bit of that, as well as, I always want to run the ball well because of what we can do with play action off of that. I think one area that we finally saw last week, and last time we were together with Spenny, we talked about this. They ran that naked bootleg with Lamar for a first down on, I think it was 4th and 1. So we finally saw that. So I'd love to see, more under center zone running. and what they can do with play action off of that. I think it really just puts those backside DNs in a huge bind, slows them down. And if they don't spy Lamar, then it's going to create opportunities for Lamar to just take off and do what he does so well in space. So hopefully we see a little bit more of that as well. And then when we move on to the defensive side of the ball, and we're talking about a Steelers offense being called by, do we want to start with Matt Canada's hat? Like, I think we should maybe address it. And just how do you feel about the hat? Because it's concerning to me.
Yeah, no, it's just one of those things where, like, if things are going well and you're the cock of the walk and you're firebombing teams every single week, you can do what you want. You can.
Brian Billick did it.
Yeah, listen, he did. But I mean, this is more like Tim Robinson sitting in the courtroom and they start talking about his hat. Like, what the hell? Like, that kind of feels like the territory we're in Canada right now. He's he's going to have to go for a more conventional look, I think, until morale improves and they're above 25th in points per game. A stat that I had to look up to rebuke the hat, but far be it for me to reveal the source of it. But it's tough, man. I would go with the ball cap. I understand. I got some replies about melanoma and things of that nature, and I totally get it from a safety standpoint. But get yourself some sunscreen. Get a regular ball cap that can cover your dome piece just fine. I know he's bald. I've been bald myself. I know what it's like. So let's cut it out, Matt Canada. Come on.
Yeah, no, and it's like he looks Australian, and I feel like you can only pull off the Aussie look if your O-line's playing well. That's kind of how I feel about it. Just I'm thinking rugby scrums and all those great things that they do down under, but it's just not working for him. So hopefully we see a little bit of a shift there for his own sake. I don't want to see him he's got a cool last name. Represent the country. I think it's giving us nationally a bad look. So let's get it together. But moving into what they do and don't do well, it's been an interesting kind of year because, there's been so much talk about Jaylen Warren versus Najee Harris in the run game. The O-line's banged up, so it looks like they're going to have their right guard, James Daniels. I don't know if their practice reports come out, but he hasn't practiced the last 2 days. So you're probably going to get Nate Herbig. Yeah, Nate Herbig out of Wisconsin, if I have it right. They actually have his brother, Nick, the edge player out of Wisconsin. So they got the Herbig brothers, but he's going to be playing right guard. He played 51 snaps. No, he played the whole game last week. And that was, I think, one of his first starts in the NFL. So a little bit of a liability there across from, I'm going to say his name wrong, but it's like Chukwu Okafor, their right tackle. So that right side of the D-line or the O-line is looking a little weak. And then their left tackle, Damore Jr., also not going to be in this contest. So they have Broderick Jones out of the University of Georgia. And his rookie year, he played 51 snaps last week. So he's going to be making his first NFL start. So an O-line that wasn't performing well, now banged up. It's going to create some interesting opportunities. How would you like to see kind of Mike Macdonald approach this one?
I'd be interested to see if they could get home with 4 in this one. It's something else that I talked about on today's podcast for us, because it's just like you've got Marlon Humphrey making fun of Clowney about Mr. Almost thing. We already know Odafe Owe is already that. He might not even play in this game, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, it's been a lot with Macdonald. It's been a lot of twists, a lot of stunts, a lot of sim pressures and stuff like that have created pressure. I'd be interested to see if you can kind of, at the very least, get home with 5 and sort of just bring some pressure in that way and not have to like oversell yourself too much, which Macdonald doesn't really do too much of that anyway. But if you can just have one game where you're just getting home with 5 guys, I feel like this would have to be the one with an injured O-line, with a hobbled Kenny Pickett. Even if Trubisky does get in there at some point, it just feels like the time to do it. So hopefully they can do that. But if not, I mean, whatever Macdonald's been doing, it seemed to be working. I know Minshew had a couple sustained drives there where he was completing a ton of passes in a row, but outside of them, I feel like they really got in his face as well. So, whatever you got to do to get home, go ahead and do it. And I would say at this point, maybe just keep doing what you're doing, but hopefully they can set a tone early by getting home with not that many numbers, because I think that would allow the Ravens to get them well behind the sticks and into third and not manageable situations.
Yeah, I feel like clogging the middle in coverage, that's where the Ravens seem to keep getting beat, is just kind of crossing routes into the middle of the defense. And a lot of that's just because they're using Queen and Roquan as blitzers so often. And so, they're taking that one extra guy away. You're asking one of the linebackers to cover a bit more, and they're asking the corners to play over top. They don't mind. It seems like they don't mind giving up the yardage. It's kind of that bend, but don't. I find it such an interesting approach because Wink was so aggressive Dean Pease was like the model of being conservative. And I feel like Mike McDonald's found like a really nice balance between the two, where they're going to get, they're going to fly and they're going to, blitz, but they're not necessarily playing aggressive in their coverage looks. They're kind of keeping the ball in front of them. So I think that's obviously, what are you laughing at? What did I say?
The whole bend but don't break thing. I just always got a kick out of that. Like, why even bend, Dean? Like, why?
It's because things shrink in the red zone, so that's just how we like to do it.
No, and like it's funny because like that's how they won a Super Bowl. They bent, but they didn't break, right? With Dean Pease, so like that
in a very literal way with Michael Crabtree missing that catch.
Our personal friend Jimmy Smith. I asked him if he held Crabtree on that play, and he said no, and then blew his vape in my face. So that was
Yeah, no, I remember asking one of the guys that I coached with, who was a defensive guy, and I was like, "Why would you bend but not break?" And he goes, 7 points is more than 3. And I was like, "That's a very fair point, but like, what if we don't get 7?" But yeah, no,
you know who didn't bend? The 2000 Ravens. That's the tradition I want to live up to. All right,
they broke the other side of the ball, is what they broke. That's the only thing that got broke.
No, it's not even possible to not bend in today's NFL. So I totally get it. I just always thought it was like such a funny thing. And like people would always like get super mad at like Dean Pease, and then like he would have his cadre of defenders, well, bend but don't break. And I don't know. I always got a kick out of it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like I said, I think he's found a nice mixture in the two, where there's a little conservative on the back end, keep the man in front of you, but don't. But what he does up front and the selfless play of Queen and Roquan. I mean, like last week, Queen had a legitimate path to the quarterback, and he still went and set his pick for Roquan to twist off of. So like the way those two are playing together, the way they're flying, it's been great to see. And I really think with Mason Cole and Nate Herbig side by side, I think that's that center right guard spot they could really exploit. They're really not good in space, and they don't really have the foot quickness. So, but when it comes to getting home with 4, this would be the week I think where they could do it. I mean, I think Broderick Jones is going to slowly take steps, and I think he's a good player. So I'm not trying to say that. He was in his first NFL action in a regular season game. So I don't want to put too much judgment into that because it's a rookie. I found he struggled a little bit, but I also found he got better as the game went on. So, but I do think they can attack that right side of the D-line, and that's where Jadeveon Clowney, I think, could do a lot of work. God, I'd love to see him get a sack or 2 in this one. Just he could have, if he made his tackles, and like I don't even mean like get the pressure home. I mean literally just make the tackles that he created for himself. He would have 6 sacks on the year. Like it's absurd how much pressure he's been bringing. I think he's like.
I charted it differently, actually. I had 3.5 in my chart.
3 1/4. 3 1/4. So I'm really looking forward to this one. On the back end, how do you kind of feel about Brandon Stephens? Probably the most polarizing. It's such a classic Ravens corner thing. I feel like there's always one guy that everybody hates in the Ravens corner room. Used to be Anthony Averett. Now it's Brandon Stephens. How have you felt about his play?
Yeah, Shockey Brown, things of that nature. I've always had a soft spot for him. Like I felt like, in particular last year, like there were plays that you could have made in the Patriots game where he was like in a phone booth with dudes just absolutely on their hip, and they just made like circus catches on him. And people were like, "Oh, Brandon Stephens, like terrible." It's like it's a good rep. He just got dunked on, and like.
Do you remember the Patriots game?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. The
Devontae Parker.
Yeah,
the one where he's like up. I was like, you literally Randy Mossed him. Like,
yeah. People were like, "Oh, Brandon Stephens." I was like, "No, dude, that was the like freaking LeBron D Wade thing." He just like absolutely clowned on the guy, but he was in perfect position, and like I don't know, that just happens to you as a corner sometimes. I feel like there have been certain instances where yes, he does get lost, but they're moving him around in the secondary. That can't be easy. Like he hasn't really had a traditional development. All the way back to the fact that he was a running back at UCLA, which is maybe Spencer's favorite fun fact about anyone. He brings it up to anyone who will listen, that he was a 4-star running back recruit, which we actually saw, bear out. The prophecy was fulfilled when he
really good vision. Like,
yeah,
really
he got the ball in his hands, and he made something happen with it. So,
and the people are asking, is Brandon Stephens a ball hawk? Like,
I mean, listen, you're talking about a running back room that could maybe use a little bit of juice. How about a little Julian Edelman, Troy Brown situation? We get him
yeah,
over.
I like that. Get going 2 ways. Travis Hunter.
Yeah,
Like
exactly. So yeah, I don't know. I've always had a soft spot for him. I feel like people expect way too much out of like even CB3 these days. They expect them to just like be, as good or as locked down as a CB2 or a CB1. And I mean, right down to the fact that the responsibilities are different. That's just not going to happen. And also right down to the fact that it's just a more wide open spatial league. It's hard to consistently be in position, consistently be really good. And if he were, then he'd probably be a CB1, but he's not. So you got to adjust your expectations to the guy. And I think he's fulfilled that role pretty well thus far.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing, I think he's leading the NFL in number of coverage snaps without allowing a touchdown or something crazy. He's got that PFF stat that's floating around. So, I wouldn't say he's a top corner in the NFL, but given the injuries to Marlon Humphrey and the rest of the room, I'd say he's outperformed my expectations. I think that's the best way to put it. So it's good to see. And then obviously, Kyle Hamilton's I think he's taken the step. And how nice is it to see a guy take a step this soon, like rather than it being year 4. And we're talking about the 5th-year option. We're seeing, and I'd say same with Tyler Linderbaum, like he's been that good. So to see the 2 first-round picks from last year in year 2, kind of taking these steps. Someone just asked, is he playing? I don't see how he doesn't play. Last week was weird. Don't know why he didn't play. Wondering if it had something to do with them knowing Watson was out. Again, conspiracy theory. I don't know that for certain, but it was just strange. But I would say he's 95% playing this week. I haven't heard anything to the contrary. So, how well do you think that safety room is going to be with those two? And, just how much does Marcus Williams change things? And also, I'll throw a wrinkle in there. I'm throwing like 4 questions at you at once. Talk about the safety room generally. But, Geno Stone's played well. So how much do you have to keep him involved? Like, it's kind of interesting. You go from, and we've seen Mike McDonald when he was at Michigan, he'd use 3 safeties. Dax Hill was kind of what I guess Kyle Hamilton is in this scheme. Maybe not so much outside corner, but bringing him down into the slot corner spot. So, how do you kind of manage that safety room moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say right off the top, like 3 safeties, and then those safeties doing multiple things and playing multiple roles, right down to being slot cornerbacks, is kind of the idea of, what a modern safety is a lot of the time. And so, yeah, I think you'll be seeing plenty of Geno Stone still. And I think it only helps when you have a guy who is dealing with an injury. And also, like, I feel about Williams coming back, like, it's not good that he got injured, but it wasn't a lower body injury. So he's not going to lose that range. Maybe he's going to have some difficulty lifting his arm in certain situations, fighting for the ball or whatever it might be. We do know he's a ball hawk. Hopefully it doesn't affect his ability to catch the ball if he gets a couple thrown his way. But I mean, upper body injury, he'll still have his range. I expect him to play very well. And you're talking about a receiving core, which Pickens is very good, obviously. I haven't really seen much from Allen Robinson. I haven't watched the Steelers, I haven't sat down to watch him. I've seen them a little bit on Red Zone, but haven't seen a ton from him. They got Calvin Austin involved against the Raiders in a big way with that long touchdown. So he's one guy that I think Williams might need to check a little bit with his speed going over the top. He might need to provide the lid on the defense. But, yeah, I mean, not the most impressive receiving core I've ever seen with Deontay Johnson out, and especially comparing it to a Steelers receiving core. I feel like this matchup definitely goes to the Ravens' favor, especially with Williams coming back.
Agreed, big time. The only thing I'd say about Calvin Austin is it's kind of the type of slot receiver that will give Kyle Hamilton probably the biggest challenges, just being the smaller, shiftier guy, and Kyle Hamilton being more of the size, physical guy, where I think Hamilton's going to match up better with the T. Higgins of the world that play in the slot, or even when they put Chase inside. But he's going to struggle a little bit more with the little dudes that can kind of run really well. So it'll be interesting to see how they manage that through this game if Marcus Williams does indeed play. And I completely agree. Best formation is big nickel with Stone, Williams, split safety, Hamilton down near the line of scrimmage. I think that's definitely a formation you can look to see. It's going to be interesting how they manage it with, like I said, the ability to move Marlon inside when he comes back, and won't be this week. Probably won't see him till after the bye. After the bye, or is that too far? Maybe it'll be before the bye. I think you'll probably need 2-3 weeks.
Is the bye after London?
Yeah, I think it's like week 8, and they play again week 9. So we might play before the bye. I'm honestly not sure. I'd have to go look at the schedule. But he'll need a few weeks to ramp up, is what I'm getting at. So be super interesting to see when he's back how they manage that. But that's not necessarily this week's problem. So let's just wrap her up here with the the $1 million question. What's your prediction for this one? What do you see kind of the score being, or the score range being? Is it going to be a tight one, blowout? How do you see it?
I think I had the Ravens winning 20-17. I expect a tight one. I feel like it's always going to be a tight one when these two teams play. I feel like you've got Tomlin. He's going to be able to get these guys up for this game. I think TJ Watt has too much pride. I think Patrick Peterson is a guy that has pride. He's going to be excited to be playing in his first iteration of this one. There's just some dudes on that defense that you got to worry about still. So, I'm worried about that from the Ravens offensive perspective. And then defensively, I'm not really expecting a whole lot, but like I said, we saw Gardner Minshew go like 10 for 10 and have a couple of successful touchdown drives. So maybe you have a fluky couple of those. I think the Ravens will be able to put together a couple touchdown drives of their own. But ultimately, I think the Ravens are a much better team at this point. Like they just have, I think, more talent, and I think they're a lot healthier, and they have a slight edge in coaching with Monken over Matt Canada. I think Terrell Austin's doing a pretty good job otherwise, but I don't know. I've just got the Ravens winning a tight one. I think if this were any other team, if this was a different helmet, I might have them winning by a touchdown or more, but I've got it being a field goal game, and Ravens get out of there with a W.
Yeah, I tend to agree with I think it's going to be tight. It seems to always be tight. It was always funny to me that 2015 year where they were decimated by injuries, didn't have Flacco. They went 5-11. I'm pretty sure they had two of the 5 wins were against the Steelers, because of course they were. So it's just, they will always be competitive against each other. And I don't expect anything less in this one. I do think the injuries on the Steelers offensive line, I think it's really going to handcuff the way Matt Canada's it's going to handcuff the way Matt Canada.
What are you doing, man?
I need to speak and spell. It's going to handcuff the way he calls this game, and it's going to work in the Ravens' favor. So that's really what I'm expecting from them on offense. I want to see the momentum continue to build. There's been a lot of interesting theories thrown out there that some of these struggles that we've seen early from the Ravens offense are all part of the long-term plan. Never really understood that myself, what they were kind of referring to. I'm assuming what they're meaning is like, you kind of need to miss on certain looks because that's the type of philosophy they're trying to implement. And then once they start to click on it, everything else will make sense. But maybe I just don't understand the scheme well enough to know what that means. But it is interesting. I do like the momentum that they're drawing. I think things have looked a little bit cleaner. I'd like to see them avoid the penalties on offense, especially false starts and all the kind of BS penalties that seem to kill them. Don't put yourselves in long situations if you don't have to, and just continue to move the ball. And, as always, let Lamar be Lamar. I don't think there's, much else to do there. You got to I think it was Michael Crawford and Chris Aguilera put this to me once, and they said he's like a point guard. He's a playmaker, and sometimes it looks weird, and I think that's what you were referring to with some of the crazy plays that he's had where it's looked funny, but he's just a guy that makes plays. And so I think you want to get him in a good structure, but you also want to be able to empower him to continue to do that. So I hope we see that. So we're going to wrap up there. I'm kind of agreeing with Jake, a little bit boring, but I'm also thinking 2017, 23-20. It's going to be one of those games, one of those AFC North battles. So be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you're new here. We're doing this every Friday except for last week because I had a sick kid at home. But that's all for you guys. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. Peace out, everybody.